I'm Susie McArthur. I'm a partner in the Energy and Infrastructure team at Brodies. We are a law firm. For those of you who don't know Brodies, they'd like to say about us slightly. We're a UK law firm headquartered in Scotland's largest firm in our jurisdiction, and we act for a number of clients across the UK and internationally. Specifically in relation to heat networks, we have been working on district heat networks for over 20 years now, having supported Aberdeen City Council when they set up Aberdeen Heat and Power, and we've worked with Aberdeen Heat and Power ever since. We supported Clyde Gateway on their Kilmarnock scheme and the PT Gibbs project. You heard about Midlothian Energy earlier from Paul. We worked with Midlothian Council on procuring that in partnership. And we worked with Stirling Council on their Forthside project, with Fife Council on the Glenrothes Energy Network, and we're currently working at the moment with City of Edinburgh Council on finalising the contract arrangements for the Granson Heat Network. We also work with the wholly private sector, including house builders and those utility businesses that are supporting those private schemes for regulatory reasons, though we're not allowed to put those on slides, so you just have to trust me that we do that. So why is a lawyer standing up to talk about financing? The reason is when I approach heat network projects, and indeed building on experience from delivering other types of energy projects in more mature markets, what I'm thinking about when I look at delivery models is how are they going to be structured in order to best support finance. So that's really the lens through which I'm approaching this today. So when I think about delivery model, and apologies, this is a very busy slide, but this is what's in my head when I'm thinking about delivery models. It's working out what are all the different component parts of a heat network project and who's going to perform all of those various roles and how does it all fit together. So you can see right in the centre there, the key point of it is who's actually responsible for delivering this whole thing. Whose project is it? And the project owner. And that may or may not involve an ESCO, which is effectively a special purpose company, an energy services company is what the abbreviation's for, that holds the whole structure together and is responsible for making sure all of this happens. Every single role and responsibility in that slide doesn't need to be delivered by a different person, but it's quite unusual that they would all be the same person. And so you might have somebody different providing heat to the network over on the left-hand side. You have potentially different people funding or investing in the project. You'll have somebody whose idea is, who's actually come up with the idea of delivering this project, who's promoting it, the sponsor. Somebody's got to be responsible for actually dealing with all the project management and administration, and that may well be the ESCO or the project owner, it might be someone else. There'll be various landowners involved for all of the pipe routes, for the energy centre, and also those landowners might also be customers. And the heat customers are key to this, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And then at the bottom there's all the different delivery contracts that are required to put pipes in the ground, to build an energy centre, to operate and maintain it, to optimise the system, to do metering and billing and the customer services. So a huge number of component parts. And that's what I'm thinking about when we're thinking about how do we make sure this fits for what funders and investors are going to require. Focusing for a moment on the ownership bit in the middle, there's a spectrum of ownership options, and this is often what we talk about when we're looking at delivery models, particularly from a public sector perspective, ahead of going into procurement. What does our delivery model look like? Who owns it? And I like to think about it as a kind of continuum where you've got wholly public sector at one end, wholly private sector at the other end, and some of the partnership models in between. So right at the far right, we've got the wholly public sector model. And that's those big municipal schemes that are owned, operated by the public sector. Traditionally in Scotland, there's been quite a few of those. An example of that would be Fife's Dunfermline scheme, which is operated in-house. Yes, they use specialist contractors, so I'm going to flick back. Sorry, don't worry about flicking back and forwards. I'm just quickly going to flick back and forwards. They will procure other people to do those delivery contracts, but ultimately it's them that's responsible for making sure that the whole project happens. Moving slightly to the left of that, the public sector ESCO model. So that's where you have the public sector owning a company that's going to deliver the whole network, and that's the Aberdeen Heat and Power model. Basically, Aberdeen City Council owns that ESCO. It's responsible for delivering all the heat networks. I should also say that Aberdeen Heat and Power is a company limited by guarantee with an asset lock, which means it's actually not for profit. That doesn't mean it's not profitable. It just means that the profits that are generated by that business are reinvested back into the business in order to keep the tariffs low for consumers. Then in the middle, those public-private sector joint ventures, an example of that we've heard already this morning from Paul in Brodies Energy, where we have the public sector and the private sector co-investing and creating the joint venture ESCO that will deliver the project. And that could be 50-50, which is what Brodies is, or it could be minority-majority, so council may be potentially investing a smaller proportion if that's what they have available in order to get a level of control commensurate with that investment. Further to the left, the private sector concession model. We heard Andrew Cripps this morning talking a little bit about that, the DESNET model with the golden share. Granton is actually based on that in the sense that it's a private sector concession model, but it has a golden share. The rights that attach to that golden share are individually negotiated on most projects, and what we're hearing from the market is that the rights that may have attached to that golden share in those first few projects might not be attaching to that golden share in the next few projects. So I think there's a degree of market hardening towards getting a huge level of control without any investment, which to my mind seems understandable. And then right at the far left, wholly private sector. So examples of that, some of the work we're doing with house builders, with the utility providers that service those where no public sector involvement. House builder or developer is building homes, they need a heat solution, and private sector provides that heat solution. The ones that don't fit I think it's just been behind me, but it's not, it's over there. So the ones that don't fit very well into that spectrum, community-led. I haven't said community-owned, although it could be community-owned, but a project that is sponsored, pushed forward from a community base. I've not decided yet whether that's private sector because it's owned by the community, or public sector because the community is a public sector. So you can think about that and tell me later. Not for profit, that's really a variation on any of these models. Any of these models could be not for profit in the sense that they could have profits reinvested into the delivery model. And unbundled, and by that I just mean more separation of the various roles and responsibilities. So we do have unbundled models in Scotland at the moment where the heat generation energy centre is owned separately from the network. There are small examples of the customer side being separated off from the network as well. So bulk supplies to, for example, social housing schemes, but that's a little bit rarer. So what about the sources of finance that are available to support these projects? On the public side, there's public sector grant funding available, for example, the Heat Network Fund that we heard James talk about this morning. There's also public sector equity investment or even loans, and there I'm really thinking about those local authority owned or joint venture schemes where the local authorities are putting, and indeed other public sector bodies are putting their own money in as equity. And then we also have the public-owned development lenders, National Wealth Funds, Scottish National Investment Bank. They are very, very keen on this sector. I'm sure many of you will have already spoken to National Wealth Funds, and they have products that they are hoping can be deployed on heat networks. Then on the private side, schemes will often seek contributions from customers, from the developers, and by that I mean the home developers or property developers, in the form of connection charges. And those connection charges are effectively a capital payment into the network operator for the carrying out the connection work. So that is a funding route for at least a portion of the capital cost. Then there's the private sector operator investment. So really the things Vital and Vattenfall we're talking about this morning, where those companies and other businesses like them are going to put their own money into the delivery of these heat network opportunities. And we now also have in the market private sector fund investors. These are really specialised infrastructure funds that are happy to look at heat as an asset class. There are various available in the market, but people like Asper, who support One Energy, Ankala, Amadesco, who've been doing the Bristol project. So they are starting to emerge, but I don't think we're looking quite yet at mainstream investors. These are all quite specialist funds. And so traditional debt providers, so Barclays, NatWest, banks, they are not yet playing in this space. The capital level of capital investment and the payback period associated with it doesn't quite stack for them at the moment. And what do these investors want? You've heard some of this already. It's not really rocket science, but I do think it's helpful to just keep emphasising it, that heat networks are capital investment, capital intensive with long payback periods. And yes, different investors might want different things, we can talk about that, but all of them want a return on the investment that they're making in some form. For public investors, that may be slightly broader, so they may be looking at the economic outcomes, so what level of economic development is building a heat network going to provide to a local area, what sort of jobs and skills and fuel poverty alleviation, what other socio-economic benefits are we going to get from investing in the project. They will have wider targets around net zero, and they probably also want to get repaid, although not always if it's a grant investment. Not investment, if it's a grant provider. In terms of the private sector, they definitely do want to be repaid, and they need to have confidence that that repayment will come with a level of return which is commensurate with the investment risk that they're taking. That means there needs to be good risk management and a level of confidence around the revenues that are going to repay that investment. There's also a lot of investors that we see in the market do want growth potential as well, not always, but they're really looking for some kind of scale, particularly when you think about the fact that in Scotland we're competing with heat networks across the whole of the UK. There are loads in procurement. I think, Andrew, you put up the list of some of the projects that are in procurement at the moment, and they're all coming to market at once. We'd be naive to think there's not competition as to where some of that capital is going to be deployed. So in terms of the repayment that investors want, revenue confidence is absolutely key to that. So we talk about demand assurance. In heat, there's no revenue support. The RHI is closed, and we don't have a CFD equivalent for heat networks as we do for renewable electricity projects. And so we've got to get that revenue confidence from somewhere else. Yes, some of that will come from policy support, and it was good again to hear James talk about this morning the heat networks bill, heat and buildings bill, and the potential for mandatory connections and the encouragement that will come from zoning. But it's not here yet. Investors will absolutely look for long-term contracts with anchor load customers, and we talk about anchor loads all the time. Anchor loads, large heat users that are likely to be around for a long time and that are creditworthy and are going to pay. There's also a customer engagement piece here. We've got to kind of get out and sell heat networks, because the more people we can connect up, the more we can build the base around the heat network, the more confidence an investor has that they're going to make money out of it. And there's also a point around affordable tariffs and finance, and there's the potential for a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop, whichever way you look at it. The cost of finance feeds into the affordability of the tariffs, and so the more you can de-risk it, so get more customers to connect, then the better tariffs you can offer people. In terms of revenue sources, the main one is heat sales. But there are projects that have looked at wider opportunities. So Midlothian, for example, does look at wider energy projects. And if you're looking in at a balanced portfolio where you have heat sales from some projects and then potential for electricity generation or providing energy efficiency retrofit, there are then different ways that you can get revenues into a portfolio and perhaps make it a more investable proposition. The other one I want to pick up here is grid services, and I think Paul mentioned it briefly, the kind of whole systems approach. And when we start to electrify heat, which is what we're doing to decarbonise it, there will be revenue opportunities through using storage to offset the electrical demand at peak times. Grids will pay for that. There's a benefit, and there are also businesses out there who can provide aggregation and brokering services to allow you to access those revenue streams. And almost last slide, risk management. This is quite a basic slide. I know that many of you in the room will understand basic risk management, but bringing it back to the delivery model, there are a range of risks on a heat project. We talked about demand risk. Increasingly, as we move to decarbonisation, there's a bit more technology risk than there used to be. We've got the major construction delivery risk, which is going to be a challenge on any kind of linear infrastructure project. There's a huge degree of policy risk still sitting around this, notwithstanding that regulation is hopefully coming and becoming more settled. And then you also just have the risk of supervening events. So from an investor perspective, it's not that for risk management we need to eliminate all of those risks, that's impossible, but we just need to make sure that they are identified, analysed, mitigated where possible, and that they're then kept under review. And one of the key things that I do when I'm looking at delivery models is work out, well, where can we allocate all of those risks when we're setting up the contractual matrix. We need to make sure that all the risks have an owner, that somebody's responsible for all of them. There's not any left hanging, certainly not any left hanging in the middle of an ESCO that can't really deal with them. And that all the risks are allocated to people who can actually manage them. They're the specialists, they're the people best placed to do it, effectively enabling parties to play to their strengths. And there will be some places actually where it's appropriate to share risk. So one of the big positives that Midlothian Council saw from setting up Midlothian Energy was the fact that actually all the risks were shared at a basic level with a private sector partner, and that gave them confidence to invest in the project. And sharing risks can also mean things like, say for example, there's environmental contamination on a site. Well, maybe the contractor takes the first portion of the risk up to a cap, and then the public sector takes the rest of it. And there's loads of different ways to cut it, but it's really important to think about it and then allocate it where you can. And yes, there'll be negotiation, but making sure it's all properly allocated and it's really clear what everyone's doing. So last slide, conclusion. There is finance available for these projects. It's available for the right projects, for well-structured projects with good risk management. And it does come at a price, but that price can be reduced with the right structure. Revenue confidence, absolutely key to get investors comfortable that they will be repaid, and good risk management essential to reduce the cost of capital. That was all I was planning to say as an introduction to the next session. So I don't know, Emma, if you need to say anything else before we all sit down.
Yeah, no, thank you for our panel.